Welcome back to another episode of The Rundown. It's myself, Joe Nagy, and Brandon Worth, who I think is to my this way, possibly. I think we'll see how it
Maybe.
follows up in the recording. I don't know, but it's going to be a good episode. We have a little bit of recap to do with just everything going on in CSAA. It's kind of getting down to the wire with the last few games, plus some makeup games are getting tossed in there. It's a wild little situation we find ourselves in, but Brandon, it's going to be a good one, no doubt.
It's going to be a great one. CSAA action is heating up, and it's certainly going to be fun to talk about. Also, big shout out to Coach Jessica Heiss for joining us on the last episode of The Rundown. If you missed that, you can check that out on YouTube, wherever you find this show. Really good conversation. And we basically called the upset of talking about them hopefully beating Morley Stanwood, and they pulled off the upset on the road. So, hey, maybe the rundown had a little bit of something to do with that. I
Probably
mean,
that game
coaches,
was insane. That game
I
was
mean, I
insane.
mean, yeah, coaches, if you want that little luck charm, you got to hit us up and come on the show.
Call us up. Line is always open if you really want to. But yeah, huge thanks to Coach Rice for coming on the show. I think we should just get right into it. Kind of a quick little Big Rapids recap what happened over the last about 2 games or so. They played Morley Stanwood, a win, lost to Whitehall on the road. 2 away games. They're finally going to be home this Friday. But Brandon, let's start with that Morley game. I was there. That one was very unexpected for the outcome of that one, as well as just the whole game. I mean, two opposite ends of the table. Big Rapids was kind of fighting for a spot in that top four, and then Morley was kind of in a spot where they were just looking for some momentum later on in this, or to kind of push them into the later part of the season. But Morley was looking really good. Their shots were falling. They were holding the tempo really well. They were kind of disrupting that press break that Big Rapids was trying to set up earlier on in the game, and Morley really surprised a lot of people. Plus, it was snow coming, so it was an insane atmosphere. I think it was just a very big culmination that allowed Morley to kind of have the momentum and the control, but Big Rapids able to pull it out in the end.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that even though you see the W going in Big Rapids' favor, Morley won this game in the sense of being able to beat the odds because on paper this should have been a 20-25 point blowout just based on what we'd seen from comparable games earlier on the season with common opponents and the stats obviously lining up in Big Rapids' favor. But Morley played an excellent game. I mean, just talking to you, Joe, on it really felt like everything was going the Mohawks' way in that basketball game. And you looked at the stats afterwards. I mean, they shot 47% from 3-point range. I mean,
Yeah.
that is hard to compete with in a 32-minute basketball game when you got a team shooting so well. They shot, I believe, early overall in the game 51% as opposed to Big Rapids 31%. So you talk about all the shots falling Morley's way, but Big Rapids really they did a good job hanging in there. They did it defensively with a lot of turnovers, and they were able to create some points out of it. So I think it's a really big win as far as for them being able to come back out of that game with a win. Obviously, they hadn't been playing overall the best in this last 3-game stretch, which we'll touch on Whitehall in just a little bit. But especially being able to turn over Morley 24 times, being able to score off of some of those possessions. I mean, that's a really big key for this team because we've seen their offense do very well. I mean, they came in to these last couple games before Cedar Springs with at least 62 points in their last 3 games. Then over the last couple games, they haven't reached 54 points or under in the last 3. So you talk about them, especially being able to grit out those defensive games. I think that was a really big win for them on the road against a hostile crowd, but what Joe was telling me over there in Morley Stanwood. So big shout out to all the fans that showed up there. But big win for Big Rapids. I think Morley still played a really good game, and it's just going to make these last couple matchups here on the schedule much more interesting when we talk about seeding for the CSAA tournament.
Yeah, and I think the big thing to point out too in that Morley game, Riley Venix was absent, so that was kind of their glue guy, their energy guy that wasn't there. So able to grit that one out was big time. Let's move to the Whitehall game that was on Monday. They had one practice on on Sunday. Coach Thomas was telling me that they were kind of able to kind of pick it up. They were trying to switch up the defensive schemes, catch Whitehall off guard. But if you don't know, Whitehall is the number 5 team in the state of Michigan, and they really showed it because that score was pretty lopsided. But you can't really help it when you got such a solid team in Whitehall. But I would think, although the score is 75-27, I was there. There was some really solid moments, and there was moments too where it seemed like Big Rapids was going to be able to go on run, but Whitehall just did so well and kind of closing off the passing lanes on the drive, and then just kind of really overwhelmed Big Rapids in a way. But tough loss, but I think there was a lot more high points than people might think.
Yeah, absolutely. You look at the scoreline, and obviously you look at it as a complete defeat from a fan's perspective that might not have watched this game. But Whitehall is a state contending team. Let's start off with that. We can lay
They're
that up
good.
front. Anybody can argue with me about that. I will make sure to let you know every single way that Whitehall is a state contending team. One, they have one of the most athletic teams in West Michigan as far as a group of athletes are concerned. Obviously, they're very good basketball players, but they are good athletes. We saw that in the football playoffs. Big Rapids able to upset them, which clearly, if you looked on paper, you looked on film, Whitehall was the better team going into that matchup. So obviously, revenge for them was certainly on their mind. But I think especially when you look at where they're at, I mean, they went to Cadillac, a team that Big Rapids also did not have good luck against at home earlier on this year, and they beat Cadillac at their place. One person would definitely say that Whitehall is going to be a state contending team. That person may be myself. There might be more out there that believe that, but I think especially with Big Rapids, Coach Thomas especially mentioned this at the beginning of the season. They were going to load their schedule because they wanted to test these kids, especially in this season. Because last year, obviously, we saw a lot of wins. We saw 20 wins from this club last year. Obviously, the Dunn twins, Jack Ruggles, Owen Gammons, that crew. Now you got a lot of guys in a new role. And for a lot of people, probably consider maybe they'll bring down the schedule. Coach Thomas said no. Like our program is going to move forward, and that means we got to play tough teams, right? So they go to Shepherd, they go to Aviation, they go and play TC St. Francis, they play Benzie Central, all these double digit win teams, and then they play Cadillac and Whitehall in the second half of the year, which are two really tough basketball teams to beat. So I think what it looks at it, you look at the substance of that game. Obviously, defensively, Whitehall was very good at being able to get turnovers and get on the break really well. I think one of the things that makes them so good, they can get out and run. And Joe, this was really something I think you saw and you were explaining really well was they really got turnovers or even on quick missed shots from Big Rapids. They'd get out in numbers immediately and get offensive opportunities on the break. And that's certainly tough to beat when you're talking about scheme and just being able to be multidimensional. You don't have to usually run as many plays and sets as much as just getting out and being athletic, being able to get out and run, get numbers in transition, find open buckets. And it just seems like Whitehall really is one of those polished teams that could really make it a run towards Brez this year.
Yeah, I think so too. They're a very complete team. They have the ability down low. They have Cam Thompson, who is the guy who is a very good athlete. I mean, he was kind of really just doing work down there. Ty Gilchek and Gabe Jenga were trying their best, but just a little bit too much. Then their 3-point ball too is just lights out as well. So when you have those two things clicking, it's kind of tough to come back from that. But Big Rapids, they're going to be away, or excuse me, at home Friday for senior night. Brandon's going to be on the call, so you can hear him over there on WBRN. It's going to be a blast. I'll be producing, so you can hear me just a little bit if you're so lucky for me to be able to do that. So not too my own horn or anything, but we're looking forward to this week in Big Rapids basketball. Let's kind of transition now, Brandon. CSAA as a whole, we're kind of focusing on these top 5, top 6 teams. The top 4 teams are going to get into the CSAA tournament, and it's going to be heating up in these next few games because you have so many teams who could drop out, who could be coming in, and a lot of teams who are hot that are going to be looking for this final push. Who are you kind of looking at right now, Brandon?
Yeah, so right now, as we record this on Wednesday, the 7th, right now, Reed City, Whitehall, Grant, Big Rapids owning those top 4 spots.
White
Newaygo is
Cloud.
going to
White
be,
Cloud.
or excuse me, White Cloud, yes. So Reed City, White Cloud, Grant, Big Rapids. Newaygo will be fighting their way to try to get in. Central Montcalm, Kent City, that statistically have a little bit of a chance, but they're basically going to have to win out and hope the others lose out, which might, based on numbers, might not happen. So they'll be fighting for that second tier spot in the next
You
4.
never know, Brandon. You never know.
I know I can't count them out. I can't count them out. But I mean, for Newaygo, this is certainly going to be a really tough stretch over the next couple games. Tonight on this Wednesday, they're going to be playing against Hart, a team that's in the district of Big Rapids, Reed City, who have made a little bit of noise in the second half. They started to pick up some wins here and there. Then they got to go to Tri-County, and then they go and play Shelby at home and then at Big Rapids. So really tough games, especially losing that nail biter to White Cloud at home. That was a really tough one for them. That really kind of felt like a must win for them momentum wise. White Cloud really kind of sealed their spot as of now. Looking at that stretch, obviously going to be a tough last week for White Cloud as well. I mean, going to have to go at Grant and then at home against Reed City. Obviously, 2 of those teams in the top 4 spots. But for White Cloud, especially with that 6-1 mark right now, they're kind of in control of their own destiny. They can win at least one of those games, they're for sure in. They win both, they're going to make a lot of noise as a potential contender for the chip. Obviously, Reed City right now, the team that everyone's chasing, but I think with Big Rapids, they're in a good spot, knowing that they really have to just beat Newaygo to get in, as long as they can take care of business against Lakeview and Chip Hills, which numbers say they would. But obviously, playing at Chip Hills' gym, Joe, you know as much as I do, is as hard as anything for how
It's a tough
just
one.
different of the gym that is, and it's certainly got this weird aura to it that always has a weird home court advantage for Chip. But especially at home against Lakeview on senior night, this is going to be a big way for Big Rapids to get back on track if they can play good basketball. Lakeview's been in and out. They've started to get a little bit better as the second half has progressed, but they really kind of broke their stretch against Holton, but obviously against Central Montcalm, they really kind of got beat up at home, so that's going to be a tough one for them. Thankfully, they're going to be playing against Crossroads going into the Big Rapids matchup, so they'll have a little bit of taste of the area before they get in. So I think that's going to be a very interesting basketball game coming up here overall on Friday. But I think right now at the CSAA level, I mean, you're starting to see Central Montcalm, Kent City pick it up, but both those teams kind of on their way out. Chip Hills has kind of lost their fire that we saw midway through the year. They had a really fantastic stretch run where they were playing against some of these tough teams. They've really kind of had some struggles overall in the second half. So right now they're kind of fizzling out, which is unfortunate because they look like they could be a really interesting team when we were looking through right after that Tri-County upset in overtime. But really since then, they've been on a huge skid. They just snapped it against Harrison, but right now it could be just a little too little, a little too late for the Warriors. But I think especially looking at that top four, I mean, Nuego's going to be the team that we're all going to be watching because right now it looks like the fourth set. They're the team that could spoil it and upset some fans. So they're going to have to pull out some wins, though, to be able to sneak their way in.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kent City and Central Montcalm, they play each other this Friday. So if one of those teams wants to make it in, they're going to have to win out to get to that 6-win mark. And to do so, either one of them is going to have to win this weekend. So I'm interested to see how this all plays out. I'm kind of with you, Brandon. I think these four that are in the top four are kind of going to be the set pieces for the CSA tournament. But who knows? Maybe Newaygo will be able to pull it out. But yeah, Big Rapids versus Newaygo is going to be a big game that's going to decide who's going to be in that fourth spot. I think this is the first time that the CSAA, especially since the induction of the CSAA tournament at the end of the year, this is one of the more interesting and kind of exciting end of season turnouts that we've been able to have so far because we have not really had four teams that are in the running for getting bounced out and who's going to be able to go in. So I think that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, this year certainly feels like there's not. I wouldn't say obviously there's a clear-cut favorite in Reed City, but when you look last year, Big Rapids was, I think, just another tier above everybody. I mean, they were in the 620 range as far as MPR is concerned. The next highest team going into that tournament was, I believe, around 560, and that would have been, I think that would have been Kent City and Newaygo right around that mark. So when you look at that matchup up as far as just all four of these teams. I mean, you got Reed City and Big Rapids at the top in MPR standards, 599. I believe Reed City enters this weekend. Big Rapids right around 590. Then you have Grant and White Cloud that are right there about the 550, 540 range, which, I mean, when you look at how a lot of these head-to-head matchups as well, I mean, you had Reed City beating Grant on the road earlier on this year. Obviously, White Cloud, Reed City is really, I think, going to be the game that everybody's watching. But especially when you look at a lot of these head-to-head matchups, I mean, Grant Newaygo was only a 7-point game. You look at that White Cloud game earlier on against Big Rapids, it was double digits for the majority of that game. It was within one possession until the fourth quarter. That's really when Big Rapids stepped it up, started forcing turnovers, and ended up winning that game. So that's a really close one. But right now, I think Reed City right now has pretty much got that tier as the top team everybody's chasing. I mean, they've been able to take care of business, especially that early win against Big Rapids at home. I think was the biggest spark they could have ever asked for, really moving forward into this season. Since then, they've taken care of business against everybody, and especially the win against Newaygo on the road where they beat them by 22 points. I mean, that's a statement win for them. So Reed City's going to be the team to chase, and that's certainly well known right now based on the tables. But I think right now, Joe, I think you're right that this is really going to be an intriguing tournament compared to last year because it was really kind of at the point where Big Rapids was in such a far gap ahead of everybody, and I believe both of those wins for Big Rapids to seal the chip were 15 points or higher that they won those games. But this year, I think we're going to see a lot closer margins. It's going to be a very intriguing tournament that will probably feel like March Madness in a little bit of a sense before we hit MHSA district play.
Yeah, for sure. And there's 2 weeks until this whole thing goes down. I think, very quick little prediction. What are the four teams that you think might sneak in?
For the four teams, I want to shake it up. I really do, but I think right now the four teams we have in, I think will be the four we see in battling for that CSAA crown. I think the biggest thing, especially right now, with these four teams, obviously Nuevo has a chance to get in. They have a really hard schedule going in the rest of the way, and they're going to need some help, especially. I mean, they're only a half game out from Big Rapids, a full game out from Grant. So I think when you look at that in the grand scheme of things, you might think, man, that's kind of tough to really battle. But I think when you look at how front loaded their schedule was, and now over the back half it's gotten harder, it's kind of really pushed them out of momentum standards. So I think for them, they really just need they really have to win every single game. And obviously, conference ones are the ones that you have to win in this scenario. But it starts with beating Hart tonight at home. They got to take care of business. And then obviously, Tri County, Shelby, they're going to have to win those games to go into Big Rapids with all the momentum in their side, because especially the fact they're going to have to play at Big Rapids under the bright lights and obscurely bright lights. It feels like, as a player formerly on that court at one point, they're going to have to win out to be able to get this. And that includes non-conference play when you look at it. So I think for them it's going to be tough sailing. Big Rapids obviously still has a couple tough games playing at Chip. They're going to have to play at TC West as well on Monday, so they're going to have to go through what they did with Whitehall on Monday again this coming week into the weekend. So hopefully they can learn from that a little bit. But I think as far as the matchups will go, I mean, obviously you see Reed City's physicality is certainly going to be the number one thing. They can really stop you defensively. I looked at the numbers updated over the last couple games. And Reed City, they're averaging 68 points a game, which is a super high mark. It's not the top mark in the conference right now. Nuevo owns that as far as conference games. But I think when you look at the defensive perspective, they only allow 49 points per game. That's really an obscure mark, and I think that just shows you how good defensively they are. And I think that's really going to be the number one thing teams are going to have to overcome. As we said, White Cloud and Grant are very good offensive teams. They can score, and they're very athletic. They can really shoot the basketball. Big Rapids is a really good team that makes a lot of plays, and they really like to play those tight games, and they really kind of flourish under that pressure. But for Nuevo especially, they have to be a little bit better defensively to get in. I mean, they've really given up quite a few points overall in conference play, and that's really kind of made them struggle a little bit as far as collecting wins, because they're scoring, but they're just giving up too many points in that process. You know, of being able to put up 57 against White Cloud is really good, but giving up 60, that's been the problem, right? So they're gonna have to play a little bit better defense, but I mean, it's going to be interesting, though, especially if the team's going to have to go to Reed City, my home floor originally. That's a really tough place to play with the one-sided gym, so they're going to have to make a lot of adjustments going into that game. But it's going to be a very fun tournament nonetheless. But right now, Reed City, White Cloud, Grant, Big Rapids, I see those four. We could see a surprise with Nuevo coming in, but right now, just based on what we've seen in history and as well as over recency, I think those are the four teams you're going to see competing for a CSAA title coming up.
Yeah, I'm pretty much chalk as well, but I think the way that these four teams kind of show out, I think could see Grant get to that 10-win spot and kind of tie up with Reed City at the top, because Reed City only has one more conference game against White Cloud coming up. They have Cadillac, then White Cloud. Grant, though, has four coming up still that they have to play. Are they easy? No, but there's still a chance for them to get to that double-digit mark in conference. They have Chip Hills, Central Macomb, White Cloud is a makeup game, and then Kent City. So three of those four games are very winnable. White Cloud obviously is going to be a tough one with their offense, but I think you're still going to be able to see a little bit of a shakeup. Big Rapids as well, I think, is going to be able to kind of move up a little bit there in that 5-2 spot. I could very well see them kind of getting to 7 with who they have left. But again, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I think, though, you're going to see the top four round out. I think Grant has a chance to go to number one. So I'm going to say Grant, White, or Reed City, Big Rapids, then White Cloud at number 4. That's going to be my 4. I got to make it at least a little bit. Who would have thought I would have said that? You know, so I got to make it at least a little bit interesting.
Wow, okay. I like that because I think especially the White Cloud Reed City game is going to have a lot of impact. And the fact that White Cloud has to play at Grant and then at home against Reed City, those are two really tough games. And the fact is, they could fall to that number 4 spot. I like the aggressiveness, Joe. If I were to go seeding, I'm going to go. I do like the point that you made. Grant as a 2 seed. Really, I think. I don't know if they can get to the 1 seed
Yeah, well,
with Reed
it's
City
kind of
with
yeah.
the head to
Reed
head,
City
but
would be Reed City has beaten Grant, so that's the one thing.
Right, right.
So they
Yeah,
would.
Reed City
I
would
think they
have to
have.
lose too.
I think they have it locked up at this point. There's not really a shot that they'd kind of go. Because who did you say they played? Still, they have two or three conference games left, or just one.
For White Cloud or Grant?
Reed City.
Oh,
They have
Reed
one
City.
against White Cloud coming up. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. They just have to play White Cloud. The rest of them are non-conference. They play at Cadillac and then they play at White Cloud. Those are the last two games they have left because they have this weekend off on Friday. So they'll be gone till next Tuesday, I believe, when they play Cadillac. So I think that's a big part of it. Reed City, Grant. I'm gonna say that White Cloud will hold on to the 3 spot. I think they might split with one of those games. I think is the possibility. But I think right now it will really depend on who White Cloud would beat in that scenario because obviously if they could beat Grant and hold them off, now you have a situation where they could sit in the 2 seed.
Mm.
Either way, I think this would turn out to be most likely a Reed City Big Rapids rivalry matchup in the semis, and you have White Cloud and Grant, whether White Cloud is 2 or 3 and Grant's 2 or 3 respectively. But I think it'd be really fun to potentially see Reed City Big Rapids battle again in that title game. Big Rapids is going to
That's why
have
I
to
put
flip
Big
over
Rapids
top.
at 3 because I wanted to. That's what I want to see. We'll see how it plays out. Now, I'm not familiar with it. Is it all the higher seed hosts the game, right? That's correct. Or are they all playing at one school?
Reed City should host, I believe, the whole thing regardless. But if they win round one anyway, they would host regardless,
Yeah,
and
that's what I
that was
figured. I
the
didn't know
case
if it
there
was
for
like a
Thursday.
little toss up, little change type thing.
Yeah,
So I
which
know
I
that's
mean
gonna happen.
that's a huge difference because that gym it's not accustomed to many
It's not
points.
easy. It's not
No,
easy to
it's
play.
hard.
And the best part is, Brandon, we'd be in the crow's nest. So
We'd be in the perch. You're right. That is one of my
that
favorite
would
places
be
to
the
call a
best
game.
part about it. So we'll see how that plays out. I think it's time though, Brandon. Maybe some Hail Marys or some half court shot buzzer beater predictions. What do you think?
Oh man, half court shot of the week.
What do you
This
think?
is gonna
What do you think,
this.
man? Game time decision. What do you think?
Oh my gosh, this is a tough one. I think if I'm just gonna throw something out there, I think the team that I'm gonna be watching, as I kind of double check here with some of my notes that I have, I think we're going to see a Central Montcalm team. Now, stay with me. Obviously, people are thinking, well, Central Montcalm, like they don't have a chance for the CSAA tournament or anything of that nature. Central Montcalm might play spoiler in one of these games upcoming. They host Grant, they host Kent City, they host Molly Stanwood. They're playing 3 straight games at home, and based off of their last 4 games, especially going 2-1 at home, I don't think this Grant game is going to be as chalk as people say it is. I know this team's been very up and down. We've documented, we've brought it up on the show plenty of times. But when you look especially at really the games that they've played at home this year, outside of the early, I believe it was this first conference game against Reed City, if I remember correctly. Yeah, 63-38 loss. Outside of that game, they played White Cloud to a 72-70 overtime game. They obviously had troubles against Greenville over the holidays, so you can kind of exclude that because Greenville is just an absolute unit when it comes to basketball. And then you have Chip Hills, they were able to take care of by 19. Harrison, they dominated by double digits. They had a little bit of trouble against Alma recently. That was their last game, but obviously Alma outside of the conference. In those conference home games, they've been very, very good. And now you're talking a team they want to try to flip over and get ahead of Kent City to solidify that 6th spot. And then you got a chance to play spoiler against Grant and potentially give them a run to knock them out, potentially the CSA tournament. I think that game's going to be within single digits. I will certainly not put my mortgage on it, but right now, that's my safe half court shot. It's not a full court heave, but that's going to be my half court shot. That game's going to be within single digits. And I think there's a chance Central Montcalm might upset some people, beat the Tigers, and create a lot of intrigue going in to the last game of the regular season.
I like that, Brandon. I like that a lot. My team, though, that you got to watch out for half court shot, game on the line, aliens coming down to earth. Who are you going to count on? I think you got to look out for Chip Hills because they're a team who has, I think, 4 home games left. We talked about it already this episode. That gym is not easy to play in at all. And keep in mind, they have both Grant and Big Rapids coming to town later on or in these next couple ones. I think they have Farwell that they're traveling to. Then it's Grant, then it's Shepherd, then it's Big Rapids, and then it's Lakeview. So they could, play some spoiler there for Big Rapids and Grant. It's not a pushover game by any means for those two teams, and they could play kind of spoiler. It might be a trap game for that type of situation. But Chip Hills, although their hopes to make the CSAA tournament obviously are not alive, but still they can catch up some momentum for this district tournament that might be coming. That's coming up pretty soon. And Grant Big Rapids might be in some hot water when they go to Chip Hills when they head on down or head on up to Remus.
Oh, I like that. That's a good one. You just forgot to mention that you'd pick Andre Iguodala also in that sentence. Shout
Yeah,
out to Max
yeah.
Kellerman, but that
Well,
was a great
I didn't
reference
want to
there.
say like it would. I wanted to like kind of say like I'm choosing Chip Hills. That's who it is. But
I
that
want Iguodala. That's who I want. Be like, oh, okay, but yeah, no, I like that pick. Especially with Chip Hills, we saw what they can do, right? Jordan Hanson's a phenomenal basketball player for that club, and obviously they have some size as well down low. They're going to have to play a lot of grittier games. I think it seems like based on what we've saw and results and statistics. Right now, they're going to have to limit teams, especially on the defensive end. They're going to have to make it a low-scoring game because they've really kind of solidified they can play some of those games up. We saw with Tri-County that was a thriller in double overtime. But outside of that game all year, I'm double checking here just to make sure I got the number right. And Harrison, they haven't scored over 52 points in a game. And that was against Molly Stanwood where they won 52-51 in a thriller there at Molly Stanwood. So they're going to have to limit offenses. That's the way they really haven't got the offensive firepower that some of these top teams have, that they're going to have to play down the stretch like Big Rapids, like Grant. But if they can, and shots aren't falling, which we've seen Big Rapids especially hasn't had some luck with shooting over the last couple of games on the road, and Grant as well has had some struggle shooting on the road as well. You got some intrigue there, Joe. I like where you're thinking.
you never know what could happen. And they snapped an 8-game losing streak. So don't let the Warriors get hot. That's all I gotta say. They could really do some damage. I think that's probably it for this episode of the Rundown, Brandon.
I think it is. It's going to be fun, though. I can't wait to follow it. You can follow along if you are interested in listening. Big Rapids versus Lakeview, WBRN 1460 AM 96.5 1077, WBRN.com, and the WBRN mobile app. You can catch myself as well as news updates from the studio with Joe Nagy. It's going to be really fun. 7:10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on pregame coverage. Might be a little bit extended because it is senior night for the Cardinals, so they'll have a lot of festivities between the varsity girls and the varsity boys games. So we'll get more into this. We're going to talk CSAA tournament, what that means, and especially as a conference game, we'll have some scores around the league and have all that up-to-date coverage for you in case some crazy pre-March Madness were to occur.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. We can't wait. That's going to be it for this episode of The Rundown. We'll be back next week, talk it up for the last week of the regular season. Can't wait for it. That's going to be it. See you later, everybody.